is now in order. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda and any additions. I'll open up for anybody who would like to add any items to the agenda. If not, we'll move on with the current agenda. So all those in favor of accepting the agenda for August 27th meeting, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, like sign. Motion passes. Second item on the agenda is consideration enactment of the GPB Rules of Order. This is something I believe we took home last month for review, and it's now time for us to, I think if everybody's had adequate time to review the proposed rules, parliamentary procedure rules, then we'll take a motion on that.
Make a motion.
Accept. It has been moved. Looking for a second.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor of accepting the language as presented in the red line document for the rules of procedure for the Glasgow Electric Plant Board signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. We have passed the rules of procedure for the Glasgow Electric Plant Board August 27th.
Yeah, okay, well, that was good.
There's just really just cleanup items it look like in there, so. I need to review and approve the minutes of the July 23rd, 2019 meeting. If have any discussion on the previous minutes?
Motion.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the minutes of the July 23rd, 2019 meeting signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. Motion passes. Billy, I believe you've got some information for us to consider ratification of adjustments to material
We
bid.
need to do a little cleanup. You all remember that really complicated matrix of materials that we took bids on that you considered at the last month. It was a matrix that had hundreds of pieces of material down one axis and about 5 vendors across the other axis. And what you approved was where we had gone through and found the lowest bid on each of those hundreds of pieces of items to result in 5 different purchase orders, because we wanted to buy the stuff from the vendor that was the lowest on each item. And of course, different vendors for different prices for the different items. So it resulted in an approved price of, or an approved total of 5 POs, $236,823.19. But when our purchasing folks started trying to cut the purchase orders, 1 or 2 or 3 of the vendors started crawfishing a little bit, saying, well, you know, I didn't mean to bid it that cheap, I can't do that, or you were only gonna get it that cheap if you bought everything from me, you know, that kind of stuff. And we see that fairly often. So what he did was, on many of the items, he went to the second low bid, and that resulted in different vendors that were gonna have, here's one, Stuart Irby was the same, but Brownstown Electric was gonna sell us $17,000 worth of stuff, and they only got $9,000 by the time they backed up on some stuff, and Gresco was gonna be $51,000, but they went down to $13,000. So all told, the changes that we had needed to make to get the stuff coming here at prices that people would honor, we went to $241, so it's about a little over $4,000 more, which on a $250,000 deal is not material. But I think the minutes should reflect that you ratified the decision to make these purchases instead of those purchases, because they wouldn't honor their bids on that. So what I need is just a motion to ratify this decision.
So like Gresco, is that Gresco? Is that how you say that?
That's how I say it, yeah.
Okay, so Gresco, I'm assuming there's some things that we're not gonna be pursuing that maybe Power Supply Company has picked
Right.
up on
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
whatever, right?
They
Okay.
said 51,000, we said, great, here's your PO. They said, oops, no, there's some stuff in there we need to charge you more for. And we said, no, we already had a lower bid than your new price from Power Supply Company.
Okay.
So, just
We're gonna outline that differently in a new, I mean, are we gonna try to start bidding stuff in the same manner and inform them that they're expected to honor any price submitted, or
Well, I mean, the only way you can really make that work is to also force them to do a bid bond or something. It just gets into a level of complexity.
Right.
And additional expense. I mean, the bid bonding process, they're just gonna automatically charge you for it.
No, I understand
So,
that.
It's only $4,000
Right.
difference, so I really think this process is still workable. It's just, everybody doesn't dot every I and cross every T when they're putting their bids together. And then when the purchase order comes in, they see it, or their boss sees it and says, what do you mean we can't do that? But still, $4,000 difference on a $240,000 deal.
Well, if it were substantial or material difference between the original and the new, I would say we
Sure.
probably let it for bid again.
Sure.
But being immaterial, I don't
Sure,
see.
I mean, I agree.
Less than 2%. So.
Right. All right, motion.
Been a motion,
Second.
second by Libby. All those in favor of accepting the purchases we approved in July with the amended agreement in August, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. Motion passes.
Okay, well, here we go with some fairly complicated stuff that I'm gonna really work hard to make it simple and really just work on hearing your all's philosophy on this stuff. We agreed with the city 2 years ago to conduct an annual rate review, and that wasn't hard to convince us to do that because it's a sound business principle to do an annual rate review. So we have begun the process. We went through it last year, and we took about 3 meetings last year to get through all the different tariffs. We've got 6 tariffs that we need to talk about. And each one of them kind of stands alone. And so what I'm going to show you tonight is only a preliminary view of 2 tariffs, so you don't have to look at all that stuff. What we have this year is, the first thing we're going to talk about is our determination of what our costs to serve the tariffs are. And so really, and the board has adopted a philosophy that this board has still not changed, that eventually we want to collect all of our fixed costs through a fixed charge. And that's, you'll hear me from time to time slip up and use a word that I try not to use outside of mathematics circles, and that's non-volumetric rate. We want to have a non-volumetric rate, which means that we're not depending on volume of energy sold to collect the revenue that we need to pay our fixed costs. So the first part of this deal is going to be a report on that evolution, what we found, and the findings are not very notable. Then usually the next thing we talk about this time of year is what TVA is going to do to rates in October. Well, this year that's simplified. TVA has said they're not going to have a rate increase in October. So that part won't have to be talked about this year. And then the third part is the new kind of wrench thrown in the works, a proposal by TVA that they have made to all 153 of the TVA power distributors. And that proposal is generally, and I've got a slide to talk about this, but just in general, it's going to be, hey, we're going to give you a 3.1% credit on your power bill. Only thing we want is in return is for you to sign an amendment to your power contract to change it from a 5-year evergreen term to a 20-year evergreen term. So obviously, as we talk about rates, the possibility for a 3.1% reduction in cost has to factor into that. So those are the 3 things that I'm going to try to lead you through. Don't let any of these graphics scare you. And also, if you don't like what I'm saying or don't understand it, stop me, and we'll go through this from a different direction. So, a little bit of history. In 2015, before we adopted our new rate structure, we were collecting Well, the rate that we put in 2016, this is the beginning of what we have now called the variable rate structure. As I said, our objective was to get this fixed charge to be 100% instead of having any volumetric component. So when we first started, we were right at 70% collection through the new customer charge, 31% volumetric, unfortunately. And when I say unfortunately, that's not a political statement, that's a mathematical statement. It's not my job to decide what's right and what's wrong. I'm just supposed to give you the facts. And factually, when you're trying to get from here to here, doing what we did where that we reduced the customer charge on RS, which is our workhorse residential rate, so we went down to 61% collection and 39% volumetric. Created a bigger problem to get by 2023 to 100%. So this is where we are right now. We have a fixed charge, $27.56 net. I mean, if you look at the tariff, there's a larger number, but it's reduced by credit and some stuff like that. $61.39 is where we find ourselves today. We're collecting a total of $44.40 from each RS customer through the fixed charge and on the average bill, enough to add from $21.56 to $44.40 through the volumetric charge. When we did the study this year, looking back at fiscal year 2019, we found that now our costs for serving these customers have gone up $1.27. So it's practically no change. But my recommendation will be, which is only a recommendation, we all should know, I don't set the rates, you all do, but to get back on track, to get to 100%, if we still want to do that by 2023, I'm going to recommend that we go to 70% January 1 of 2020, which will change the customer charge to $31.97. It's an increase of $4.41. Of course, that will also have a corresponding reduction in the volumetric charge because we're only trying to get $1.27 more. So if you increase this by $4.41, you're going to be decreasing the volumetric charge by $3.10 because that's the only reason, the only reason this goes up is we're trying to finally get all of that collection. This collection is taking place now. It's not a new thing. It's just that some of it's invisible because it's added to the cost of a kilowatt hour. I'm going to have to use the other arms. Okay. Is everybody cool with that part of it? Great. So start looking at what that would do to a tariff. It would look something like this, where this $27.56 becomes $31.97. And of course, there's no way to hide, since we itemize this stuff on the bill, there's going to be something on the bill that goes up. But there's something much more difficult to ascertain on the bill that goes down. So the delivery charge for delivering the kilowatt hours, in addition to the wholesale charge, is going from 1.8 cents to 1.5 cents. And so that goes down, fixed charge goes up, the net is about 27 on the average bill. And that's just what I've already said. Okay? Okay, then this is the second tariff. This is the what we have called the fixed rate, the thing that in 2016 we decided to offer as a way to satisfy some people that just, really considered the variable rate, or what I call the infotricity rate, problematic, we offered this alternative. And again, my opinion, one of the things that we did to try to make this look like a great deal was that we gave it an even lower customer charge. So it's at least $5 lower than the RS rate. And that just causes you this mathematical conundrum here, where that you're trying to get to 100, you went down from 60 to 50, got a nice low fixed charge, $22.74. So right now, we're collecting half of the $44.40 through this fixed charge and the other through volumetric. That means that the kilowatt, for people that decide to go with the alternative rate or TRS, whatever you want to call it, they're paying a lot more per kilowatt hour to make up for what they're not paying the customer charge, because right there's the target. That's what we got to get to. And again, for looking forward for next year, we need $1.27 more out of that. The cost of serving the average TRS customer and RS customer for fiscal year 19 was $45.67. So it's $1.27 higher. To even this up and end this artificial, that may be the wrong word, in this more attractive customer charge that goes with TRS, and go to make everything 70%, so that you've got a year to be 80, a year to be 90, and then be 100%, will be a $9.23 increase in the customer charge for these people. So it means a pretty dramatic decrease in the kilowatt hour charge, which would look like this. Same kind of thing. Customer charge goes from $22.74 to $31.97. It's $9.23. But the kilowatt hour charge goes from 11 cents to 9.9 cents. So for the average bill, for the people that use the average amount of consumption that you've designed this 9.9 cents around, it's going to be $1.23, $1.27 higher. The people that use more energy will actually, it'll be no higher at all. The people that use less than average will be weighted more heavily with the 9.23, so they'll see more than $1.27 increase. It's just the way the mathematics work on it.
And that's the winter rate, is it?
I did, because this thing is too complicated to talk about in the meeting. But yeah, I just picked the winter rate. I mean, it'd be similar with the summer and the transition. It's just that.
Because you're looking at about a, 15% reduction in the kilowatt hour charge?
Yeah.
Is that what we're gonna see pretty much across the board for all seasons?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. That's the case. Now, here's why I think you all should strongly consider eliminating this delta, the difference between the customer charge for RS and TRS. And here's a study we've done over the last year. Now, a lot of people choose the TRS, the fixed rate. If you talk to 50 people, took some kind of statistically significant sample, you would hear this. Well, I know it's a little more expensive, but it's just, I don't want to worry about it. It gives me peace of mind. So that's what I'm buying, is peace of mind. So I asked Josh to evaluate a year's worth of data on all customers that have chosen the TRS rate, and here's what we found. 57% of the people that have chosen TRS for that elusive, the peace of mind reasoning, if they had stayed with RS and still forgotten about it and had peace of mind, they would have saved money. So We are, I think,
Now, wait a minute. You're telling me that without any modification on behavior, they still used it even during the peak times, whatever they used on the TRS, the kilowatt hours used on TRS rate, it would have still been, 57% would have still been cheaper, even if they did not modify any behavior
Right.
by going to the RS rate?
Right.
Okay.
and I mean, they're making these decisions based on, I mean, there's no way I can know all the reasons, but I know some of them. I mean, one of them is that, well, the customer charges $5 cheaper. I mean, that's the kind of tidbits of information that can be exchanged in the lobby. And people don't, if they don't know which one they want to go with, well, I'll take the one that's $5 cheaper. So we're causing that. And one way of thinking, our offering that incentive is causing 57% of the people to make a poor decision. Now, I don't know when people say, I just want peace of mind, I just don't want to have to listen to that peak stuff. I don't know if they really do kind of listen to it. There's no way for us to know that. All we know is that if they did the exact same thing that they're doing, worry-free, on the TRS rate, and we're still on the RS, they'd be saving money. 57% of them. And since today, we're up to close to 2,000 people that have chosen that rate. There are 1,100 homes in Glasgow that have chosen that rate because we offered it and made it look attractive, and they also got bad information from Facebook or from Chit Chat, whomever they got bad information from. There's 1,100 households in Glasgow that ought to not be on that rate. They're wasting money on that rate. Now, that means 47% are saving money. Bless them. This statistic doesn't include size, how much difference, but all I know is that 57% in fiscal, was it fiscal 19 or was it calendar year?
Calendar of 18.
Calendar 18, the way they lived in 2018, if they had not chosen TRS and had stuck with RS, they would have saved money. So that's the primary reason. Well, my recommendation to you, which you can ignore that's what your job is to eliminate that difference that makes this rate look better on the surface so that people don't make a bad decision.
So cost of operations have gone up on about 2.5%, is what we're saying. But that $1.27,
Okay.
it's about 2.5% increase in cost of operating, right?
Some of that's the KRS.
Yeah,
added
but
to
I
it.
mean,
Well, I mean, yeah.
2.5%
Yeah.
expense growth is
Call it.
reasonable. That's
No,
right where
I
it needs to be,
don't-
right? I
Yeah.
mean, that's where it should be, what we expect it to be.
Yeah.
So what we're trying to do is make that 2.5% increase up by shifting money from the kilowatt hour rate, reducing it, and then that extra, taking it out of the left pocket, putting it into the right, basically, with a slight increase to cover the cost.
Well,
Let me disagree with that a little bit, Tag. Like you say, the 2%, you could monkey with the volumetric part and get that. if
Right.
That's what you want to do. I still think, because this is the position the board took in 2014, that we want to be here. And so the lion's share of this change is to try to get us another bite at this apple. I mean, it's not, what you said about doing it to collect the $1.27 is not a major part of.
Gotcha.
But what we also talked about was, it won't get us there in 3 or 4 years, but what we'd also talked about is, since we're inevitably gonna have cost depreciation, always making up that shortfall through the fixed charge. So that then as a whole, the fixed charge becomes a larger and larger, the volumetric portion we collect is smaller and smaller, and the fixed portion covers more and more of the overhead. It'll never technically be at 100% that way, but it will gradually get us closer and closer.
Yeah, I mean, if we were already here and it was $1.27, my recommendation would be to increase the fixed charge by $1.27.
Gotcha.
Right.
So we're not there yet.
On the RS rate, do you have, you did that same thing on that a minute ago?
I did.
Yeah, can I see that real quick?
About
So, go to the next one if you don't care, Billy. What's the reduction? So it's the delivery charge, gotcha.
Yeah.
That's what.
Yeah, in RS.
That's what escaped me, because we're selling it at wholesale anyway.
Right.
We can't reduce it below wholesale.
Exactly.
Gotcha, okay.
The only reason there's a delivery charge is that we're not at 100% non-volumetric.
Gotcha.
When we're 100%, then we got.
That'd go away.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it costs the same to get to the power to the homes, no matter which rate structure they're on,
Sure.
so that would make sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is a kilowatt charge right now? Per kilowatt, regular,
For retail or wholesale?
oh, well, residential.
TRS or RS?
Yeah, on TRS, it's 11 cents. It's what we got right here, 11.36 cents. On RS, where they're just, depends on the time of year, but it's 5 cents to 8 cents, depending on where TVA is. Because that rate has the mathematical elegance of just passing through the wholesale cost, whatever it is, and us being out of that, we just collect our money through the customer charge.
And the delivery charge?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
talking about that being at the promised land where we're
Yeah.
100%.
Okay.
non-volumetric.
So that RS it's coming out at wholesale. The only thing we can monkey with really is that delivery. We can't really do anything with because TVA sets the rates.
Well, that's a nice segue into the third item, which is to talk about what TVA has offered.
Yeah.
That would change it. So, I mean, here's where we are today. We got nearly 2,000 people that have gone with the TRS rate, and more than half of them, from a pure economic standpoint, shouldn't be there. It's costing them more. We haven't done that analysis of these. It's a smaller group. It's hard to get, good, viable data out of that. But it is a problem. I mean, we're still, in some ways, incenting people, suggesting to people that they ought to take this fixed rate, but they really shouldn't. Most of them shouldn't do that.
Well, let me ask you this. I know you didn't go out and, spread this thing out and look at total revenue and, for all customer classes, but in this scenario, really there I guess I'll just ask the question. Is there gonna be will there be a nominal impact on their bill? I mean, we're trying to collect that $1.27, I understand that. We know it's gotta go up at least on average about $1.27
average.
Is that gonna be reflective under this new rate structure if we spread that out across all rate classes? Is that kind of where we're gonna end up?
Well, now, that $1.27 is just for residential. I gotta
Yeah.
show you different numbers for the commercial customers.
Yeah.
They're gonna not be $1.27. Some of them will be a lot bigger, but they still won't be material,
Yeah.
considering the size of their bills.
Right.
I mean, again, if we go to 70%, that means you're leaving 30% to be collected volumetrically. So people who use practically no kilowatt hours will see the brunt of that $9 increase or the $4 increase because they're not also
Right.
paying any delivery charge. So,
They're not getting the benefit of the reduction.
You're talking about as a percentage, they
As a
would see the brunt, but
Yeah.
those people are also still being served
at a loss.
at a loss.
Yeah.
Somebody else is still paying part of their electric bill.
And it's the guy across the street who's buying more than average kilowatt hours, who's paying more than the designed delivery charge, because with volumetric rates, you have to pick a number, you pick a bill and design around it. And that's why we don't want to be volumetric. If we can get away from that, then nobody will be subsidizing anybody else. And that's the elegance of it that we put in place now 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago. So we might as well go ahead and move into this because there's no way to separate them. Another rate-bearing matter is the new CEO of TVA at his board meeting on August the 22nd proposed a completely new deal. And I sent you all a copy of it. It probably wasn't fun reading, so I've kind of got some simplified, my interpretation of it, pros and cons about this offer. TVA has made us an offer. Now, I guess first we ought to kind of look at why would TVA do this? They've offered to give us 3.1% credit on our bills in return for us giving them, instead of a 5-year contract, a 20-year contract. Why would they do that? Well, you know, the reason we have gone on this rate journey is that, I haven't got it in my slide deck tonight, but everybody has seen, I believe, our 10-year and growing picture of our volumetric sales. You go back to 2007 and look all the way to 2019, and you see one clear figure: decline of energy sales. And when you're volumetric, like we used to be, and you make all your money hoping people use a lot of energy to cover your fixed costs, our decision was, well, we can't make people use more energy, so we've got to become non-volumetric. That's the whole basis for it. If we're going to continue to provide the benefits that people expect the Glasgow Electric Plant Board to provide to them, we have to have a more stable income. And that's why we've gone in the non-volumetric direction. Okay, that's Glasgow. Okay, let's look at TVA. 1,000 times bigger. Same problem. They're looking at declining sales and huge fixed costs. And instead of going fully in the direction that Glasgow went, trying to go toward fixed cost collection, they've got this new idea. Let's just try to lock everybody up for a long time so they can't wander off on us. And so we lock up the people with growing kilowatt hours as well as the ones with shrinking, and we hope that we net continued growth. That the people that won't, maybe the people that won't take this deal are the ones that have shrinking sales, so let's get rid of them. That's, I believe, at the very foundation of this offer, my opinion. Another good thing that they have thrown to us, they've thrown us, is a 5% flexibility. Our existing contract with TVA is in what's called a all requirements contract. That means we're not allowed to make our own energy. We're not allowed to buy any energy from anybody else. 100% from TVA. We've complained about that vociferously for decades. And now they're saying, okay, maybe we'll give you 5% flexibility to generate your own energy. Well, that's a pretty big deal. We'd like to do that. We'd like to learn how to make that work. The con that goes with that is that it's in the agreement that you all have a copy of. It's only a promise. We promise to negotiate with you to do that. It doesn't say it shall be done. That document that I gave you has a lot of poison pills in it. A lot of ways that if we do something that TVA doesn't like, we get to eat a poison pill, which is my phraseology for the number one problem is if we do something they don't like, they're going to want their money back, the credit back. That's a big deal. I mean, for Glasgow, this represents $500,000 a year. So something like a little over $40,000 a month. And in 5 years from now, we took this, 5 years from now, we did something that created a default. Well, 5 years would be $2.5 million that we'd have to give back to them.
Well, give me an example of what that would be. We've never done anything like that before, right?
No.
Okay.
But, I mean, the kind of things would be if we if we tried to leave before the 20-year deal,
Right.
if you all jumped up and said, we're gonna sell it to somebody else, the hell with TVA, they would say, well, that's fine, give us our money back. I'm sure there's a lot of other ways to default. There's some pretty strict, tricky language in there, and I'm still not sure exactly what they meant, where that it suggested that if we even helped our customers buy power from somebody else, that would be a default mechanism. Which is kind of weird when they're offering us 5% flexibility to generate our own, so.
Which once again is not guaranteed, just a promise to negotiate though.
Yeah, exactly.
There was some language in there about minimizing cost increases,
Yeah.
but
Said
it was
perfect
pretty,
Well, here's the really sticky wicket. When you and I and any of our 15,000 people that live here hear the words "no rate increase," they believe, rightly so, and I would expect, that means my bill's not going to go up. But TVA doesn't mean that. They mean that the rate that we charge for energy won't go up. But that doesn't mean that your wholesale bill that you get every month after the charges for energy and demand are on there, there's also have the opportunity to add,
fuel cost was.
well, adjustments.
Right.
Take, for example, I think it was right around Christmas of 2005, somewhere along in there. Tom Kilgore, who was the president of TVA at the time, gets a call from Kingsport Fossil Plant and says, Mr. Kilgore, the dam surrounding our coal fly ash basin just gave away and we filled the Clinch River with coal ash. Now, what did TVA do? Well, they bought dozens of houses. They paid, I have no idea how to quantify the claims that they paid for liability. They had tried to clean up the river. They excavated all the coal ash and took it to Alabama to a contained facility to satisfy EPA requirements. And all of that stuff had a price tag, something like $2.5 billion, I believe. And how did they get that? They created in effect, they called it an environmental adjustment, but it was really a Kingston coal ash adjustment and added it to our bills. They didn't change the rate, but the check we had to write went up. So that's why I put in here that they've done something very uncharacteristic. In the last week, they've issued press releases saying, hey, we've decided that we're not going to have any rate increases for 10 years. Well, the brass band is fired up and going down the street, but those of us who are familiar with the way the contracts work know that, yeah, but there's a lot of things that could go bad with that. And that's just, I'm not saying that's wrong. If we enjoyed the low-cost electricity that burning that coal created, and suddenly the ash wasn't disposed of properly to save money, and now it's going to cost a bunch of money, I don't know who else should pay for it. But it's tough to play. It requires one to do this perfectly. One must have a perfect crystal ball, and those are hard to come by.
Most of those increases, though, those adjustments we see are based on, most of the fuels are commodities, so it's just
Right.
based on the market, right? I mean, it's whatever it is. Nobody has any control over that. But when they talk about rate increases, they mean their actual cost of kilowatt, per
Right.
kilowatt.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah,
Of course, do you remember in '75,
I probably do.
President Nixon got up on the TV and asked, on account of the oil embargo, got up and asked everybody to cut back all lighting that they could.
That was Carter, but yeah,
Huh?
that was Carter instead of
Oh,
Reagan.
yeah, Carter.
Nixon.
Okay, Carter, that's right.
Yeah.
But anyway, everybody cut back, and TVA had to raise the rates because revenue wasn't coming in.
Because they're
So-
volumetric. Yeah.
It's gonna happen.
That's why volumetric rates are horrific. They just don't, and, like I say, people started using less energy, but their fixed costs of paying for the nuclear plants and paying for the transmission lines, they're still there. It doesn't matter whether you quit using energy or not. The fixed costs, that's why they're called fixed costs.
Is that when Bellefonte was shuttered the first time? And when all that?
I think Bellefonte was probably started about 75 and got shuttered about 79, I think.
Billy Ray, does TVA negotiate with customers differently on these contracts? Or they just say, here's one for everybody? You can't negotiate a 3.2 credit, you know? and-
Well, Ron, I mean, I always hate to use absolutes, but I would bet my bottom dollar that there's no way any of us are gonna get a better deal than anybody else is gonna get, because
I didn't know.
the lawsuits would fly everywhere. Finally, another thing you should know, that what this is really all about, or again, my opinion, it's, well, you won't find this on any TVA document, but the city of Memphis, Tennessee, consumes over 10% of TVA's total output. It's the biggest customer they've got. And they have been going through some political turmoil, and they've engaged a consultant to try to find a way for them to leave TVA and buy power from somebody else. This 3.1% reduction, if I understand the numbers correctly, would mean $20 million a month to Memphis Light, Gas, and Water. So this, part of this is a clever way for TVA to say, hey, while your consultant is working on that, every month it's costing you $20 million that you could be getting off of your bill if you'd sign this deal. Clever. I wouldn't have thought of that. But that's part of this deal, is trying to save Memphis. And obviously, you know, we can't talk about rate design without knowing whether you guys want to save 3.1% or $40,000 a month. So it complicates our rate design.
There's a lot of the language in here to me that is very vague, when a whole lot of things can change in 20 years.
Yeah.
And it's just not, I mean, me personally, that 500,000 a year is great, but it's almost like, if we're talking about Memphis, almost like Robert Johnson going down to the crossroads,
Yeah.
you know, so.
Well, I would like to see,
Well, we get to learn to play the guitar real good.
if we're gonna give them 20 years, then I'd like to see a contract that doesn't have some sort of clawback provision in it. I mean,
I don't want to see a
That's
20-year
crazy.
contract,
Well, I mean, we've
period.
all, well,
I mean, that's a big
I haven't
ask.
been in a room with all
With the
of
clawback.
the distributors, but everybody that's talking about this, well, first of all, the number of the local power companies like us that just asked one question, where do I sign, has been astounding. I think TVA thought 30% would take this, and they're already over 50. And it looks like it might go to 60 or so. So there's been a huge immediate response to selling your soul. I mean, 3.1% is a big deal. And also the way they've structured it is a credit on your bill. So if you're any of the other distributors other than Glasgow, that just happens, and suddenly you've got more net income. Now for Glasgow, the way our rates are structured, with that wholesale pass-through, that 3.1% just goes right, none of it stays here. It's gonna go right to the customers, because our rate, except for the people.
Except for the TRS.
The people that have chosen TRS and the people that are on TGSA don't have a rate that's designed around wholesale pass-through. But every one of the other tariffs, if you all want to do this, they're gonna get a 3.1% reduction.
Is it right, if I understood right, it's a never-ending 20 years, it's like after.
Evergreen, yeah.
It doesn't go
That's the way
down,
I read it.
it's not
That's the
10
way-
years it left after
Yeah.
10 years.
Yeah, I mean,
It
that's the
adds a year
concept.
every year.
That's what an evergreen contract is.
And there's a lot of places in there to give TVA the right just to say, hey, we decided to do this.
And when
I
you,
don't like it.
at any time, if you serve notice, then the incentives,
Start going away quickly.
Mhm.
well, that's
And
kind of what I
also-
read, yeah.
Yeah, the incentives start going away, but also in there's a part, wait a minute, let me get all my markings here. There's a part in here that talks about from the time you give notice and it is received, that at that point, stated about then from and after its date of receipt of such notice, TVA will have no obligation to make or complete any additions to or changes in any transformation or transmission facilities for service to EPB unless there's a fully executed amendment to that contract.
Well, you wouldn't know this, Libby, but the existing contract has those. We've already experienced that.
Yeah, but the only deal is the existing contract, it's only 5 years to.
Exactly.
And there's no, and there's no
20 years and no
fallback.
potential
Exactly.
upgrades.
Here's something else that I've been stewing over since our last meeting, when Ernie was here. He just would not, they just wouldn't talk about, we're talking about the green power providers. They wouldn't talk about the $10 back to them for that generation during the peak, because that really doesn't have anything to do with their true cost. In other words, you know, what, last week we had peaks 3 days or something like that. It was 94, 94, 94. One day it's $10, the other day it's 10 cents. TVA's costs aren't really that way. That's not really how their costs are done. Now, we've done a great job creating a rate that
Tries to encompass.
beats
all that, yeah.
their archaic rate design from last century. But it seems to me if we're looking at getting into bed with them that long, we need to use what we've done. You know, when the Attorney General, when they had that proposed new tariffs with the off-peak, on-peak, critical peak, none of us that were in the room at the time said that it was wrong. It just didn't align with the way we were being billed. It was a pretty good design for a vertically integrated utility. If TVA adopted that, it would work fine for us. And that is a lot more, that rate design goes along with the way TVA's costs are a lot more than this $10 or $11 peak, and then everything else is. So, you know, as we start talking about rate design, I think we need to start thinking about, you know, getting a rate that, not just that we bill our customers the same way TVA bills us, but a rate design that TVA is gonna have to start billing where their true costs are generated.
Yeah, cost-based rates.
And I understand I'm not talking to TVA,
Right.
you can't,
Yeah.
but we're kind of the ones out front on this. In a way, maybe we need to be pushing in front a little more if we're starting into some of this.
Well, I mean, let's talk about the realities of, say, forget it, I'm not gonna do this, 5 years down the road,
Right.
we serve notice, right? We've got an evergreen period of 5 years, we're gonna get out of this, go with another provider. Because I think that's probably what's worrying everybody is, we're locked in for 20 years, right? I mean, there's nothing we can do. And then we could potentially owe millions of dollars back if there's, if we did decide to break the contract. But the realities of breaking that contract are a little bit different. I mean, if we, even under the current, or the terms of our current contract right now, if we decide to go with someone else, there's one big thing that's gotta happen. We've got to decide how we're gonna get power delivered to us, no matter who we buy it from. So there's one of two things that have to happen. Either we keep our existing distribution network and we have to pay TVA to use their backbone through a wheeling charge, right?
Exactly.
Or we have to build our own distribution network to get it from the wholesale supplier, transmission network, right? Or we have to ask the next supplier to build that transmission network, so it's actually one of three things. The last two costing potentially tens of millions of dollars to do. I mean, I'm assuming, then we're looking at another bond issue if we have to, because we can't just, come up with tens of millions of dollars out of our
That
pocket.
redundant transmission line was about 7 million, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so we're talking tens of millions.
And that's,
That wasn't very.
what Jeff's talking about is, that's only 3 miles long.
Right.
So to reach out 40 miles, I mean,
Right.
the number could be hundreds of millions.
Okay.
And it wouldn't be a bond issue, we couldn't borrow it, we couldn't borrow.
Right.
Wall Street would not lend us.
So we would end up in a position where we're having to pay TVA to wheel the power from the new supplier to our homes and businesses, right? Or to the EPB's, proprietary transmission network, right? So at that point, we're still in bed with TVA because they can charge us whatever we want because they know we're stuck. We're stuck
wheeling
with a
charge.
wheeling
No.
agreement now because we can't afford to build our own distribution network. So
Well, I mean,
at the end of 5
everything
years,
you're saying is true, and in 2005, this board told me to give them notice and try to find us another source, and I spent 3.5 years learning what you just said. That there's people that want to sell us power, but we can't get it here unless we have TVA wheel it, and then it's gonna cost more than what we're getting now. So we sheepishly went back and said, okay, can we come back?
yeah.
And they
That's
said,
not
not
a
only
good-
can you come back.
never a good place to be.
We'll build you a new delivery point if you come back. Great. So that's where we are today.
So any fears of entering into a 20-year contract over the fact that we may not be able to get out of it with the 5-year evergreen period is really moot.
We've only had the 5-year evergreen provision since 1997. Before that, they were all 20-year agreements.
Okay.
So it's a relatively new thing. They just have made the decision that they wish they had never offered that. I mean, again, everything I say about what they're thinking is conjecture. They haven't invited me to any of their
Well, there's
strategic.
a big carrot dangling out there, and that's at $50,000 a month.
Yep. It's a pretty darn big carrot. So I showed you my slides with the pros and cons, but this is the TVA. Their slides are prettier, but it kind of says the same thing.
And the ability to produce up to 2.5 to 3 megawatts worth of our own power.
That is a huge thing, because any of you that read my book that I tried to get you to read, The Grid, you couldn't miss the discussion about microgrids, and that the utilities of the future and the cities that are prepared for the future are thinking today about how to create resources and microgrids, small segments of the grid in cities or in service areas that can be served with your own facilities, so that if everything goes to pieces, then you've got a way to keep the hospitals, police department, you got a way to keep life functioning. And my team is all about trying to get into the microgrid world, but until we have our own ability to generate some power, you can't really get there. So
Which if you sign a 20-year contract, that kind of messes you up on that too.
No.
No.
No?
They're gonna allow it.
That's how
Well,
we get
it's
it.
5%.
Well, it's been promised, but not.
5% promise, but not
If
guaranteed.
you don't sign it, we got zero.
Can
Well,
you-
here's the way I look at it. If TVA is losing through the years, just like we are,
They've begun to. We've
Okay.
been losing a lot longer than they.
so here's my thought. If they're doing this to try to keep existing customers and lock them in for 20 years, if they truly want to keep those, 50 or 60% may be ready to say, hey, let's jump in bed. But I'd have to say that something has got to be negotiable. And you don't know till you ask.
That's right. I don't think.
I can only answer that with my 45 years of experience doing this. It's not negotiable. I mean, I know it feels like it should be, but there's 153 of us. And if one of us is savvy enough to negotiate a better deal, there's also in that agreement what's called a most favored nations clause. Anybody gets something, everybody gets it. And these numbers are huge. You can't, if we got a 1% better deal, by the time that gets through the 152 others, they would be
Billions.
unrealistic.
Bowling
I didn't
Green
mean to
going
be-
through this
No,
right
no,
now.
no, no,
I'm just
no.
telling you my experience.
Yeah, I understand that.
What you say, Marlon?
I say Bowling Green's got, this is the same thing Bowling Green is.
Exactly.
They had an article in the Daily News tonight.
They've already had a board meeting to talk about it?
They've discussed it at their last board meeting. It was gonna cost them anywhere from $100 million to $200 million to change, because everything was on the TVA,
Yeah.
if they changed.
So that was the number, 100 to 200. I said tens of millions. I sorely
To
underestimated.
reroute power from someplace else, you're saying? That's
Yeah,
what,
because TVA owns all the poles,
Transmission.
transmission lines and so on.
So, I felt like we needed, I know that we need to talk about this while you all are trying to decide what approach you want us to take on rate design. My objective would be for you to give me enough feedback about what I've shown you tonight, so that in September, we can go through all of the tariffs and show you those kinds of changes on fixed costs and energy charges, so that if you all can approve the whole deal either in September or October, I can go to TVA, try to get our rate proposal approved for implementation in January.
But you've got to know what we're going to do about this first,
Well,
because that's an integral
well, why
part of
would
your
you, you
rate.
don't really have to, because this is just straight pass through, it's just a,
if you, but it would change the tariffs. I mean, the
Well-
mechanics of approving a rate include you all approving a fixed tariff. But if you all don't want to do this now, you want to think about it, that's information that the team can use. We'll pursue just the $1.27 deal and the changes that would be local without this deal, and then you all can do this anytime. But if you don't do it tonight, which certainly don't think you're going to, but if you don't do it in September, then you start seeing the $45,000 a month opportunity that would have reduced rates $45,000.
Ronnie, I'm gonna make you earn your money. You look through that contract, summarize some of that stuff for us. Tell us where there may be some problem areas of concern.
Yeah,
And
I mean, I'll need
give
to
us something
discuss
back
that
next
with
month.
Billy Ray, because he knows some of the faults that could get us in
Yeah,
trouble.
I just need some more information, Brian.
well, yeah.
Yeah, figure it out.
It's not a very long contract, it's 7 or 8 pages, I think, wasn't it? But it's a lot of
It's a
stuff in
whole
there.
lot of details, there's a lot of details in
Then I
there.
got presented with a contract that's gonna lose them.
Now, you're in bed with somebody with a contract that's gonna last longer than most marriages do, so, we need to figure out what's going on.
But to help us know what to present to you all in September, how did you feel about the 70% fixed cost, or 70% percentage of fixed costs collected through a fixed charge? You want to see something different? You want me to keep going down that path? I mean, that's what we need to, there's a lot of work.
Can you
to
scroll
be done.
back to the,
Well, when I first looked at it, I was thinking, one of my first thoughts was, boy, that's a jump, and that $9.
on the TRS, yeah.
Yeah.
And, if we could maybe apply a little gradualism, to that, but that defeats the purpose of getting to where we want to be by the 2023, because at some point it's going to catch up, right? But now, we also have to remember, these are self-imposed deadlines also.
They are.
Right.
And you can decide we're happy at 70% or at 50%, we want to just stay here forevermore. That's your all's prerogative. But, you choose that. Where we are now, we've got this exposure to volumetric rates, and also that means that, remember the chart I showed you with all the dots, where how many people were underpaying and how many people were overpaying? As long as you got a volumetric component, you got people that are being forced to subsidize others.
I would like to see this 2020, I would like to look at it if we lowered that increase to the fixed charge and with a corresponding less of a reduction in the volumetric
Okay.
rate. I'd like to see what that looks like and see what that does for our time frame of
Do you
trying.
want to see a range? I mean, if you're 50% now, do you want me to show you
I want to bring
a
that
60
closer.
and a 70?
I want to
or-
bring this closer. Actually, I'd like to see it probably 20%, maybe 10 to 20% higher than what we have on the RS rate for the fixed charge. I mean, I think the fixed cost needs to be a little more than what we've got on the volumetric, either way.
Also, instead of going, it's not that.
Wait a minute, what are you saying?
What you're talking about is.
Right now it's $27.44
Right.
is on the RS, right? This one's sitting over here at what,
Well,
20?
go back, he's going back to the RS.
Yeah,
There you
so
So
27.56, right?
And they're 22.56, so there's a
Exactly.
$5 bust in there.
I want to see it closer to that $5 increase to get it in line with what we've got over here, what that does to the volumetric side.
Yeah, I mean, I think if it costs the same to get it to each home,
Just to
then the
see.
charge should be the same.
That's just, yeah.
Well, wait a minute, now that's not accurate
It is the
because,
same thing, it's just that you're gonna collect it through a volumetric
Right.
addition to the kilowatt hours. It's the same money.
Okay.
Do you want to see it in a fixed charge? More of it in a fixed charge, because that's the truth.
the
It's a
average
fixed
home, let me
cost.
say this, the average home on RS and TRS, it costs $45.67 to serve them. It's just a matter of how do we get there? I mean, it costs the same, and that's the average, and that's figured on, what, about 1,000 kilowatt hours a month, 950?
986 was what,
Nine-
yeah.
Well, I was all over it.
That's right.
I knew it was
He's right
950
there.
to 1,000, but, so it's just, we're just, how much of it's fixed and how much of it is through the markup on the kilowatt hours.
So we should plan with it.
And they, you know, when we designed this, when we went to the TRS rate back in 16, when we came up with that alternative rate, you know, the whole idea was to give that option where you knew you'd be paying more and you were willing to say, you were saying, I'm willing to go to this alternate rate and I'm willing to be one side or the other of subsidizing. You know, and then the RS rate was the one that was more pure, I guess,
Right.
for lack of a better word. And that still may be what those folks want. I don't know.
Well,
I know you're saying we're complicit in let them, by having two different fixed charges, we're complicit in,
I'm not judging you, I'm just telling you you're
right.
mathematically.
But I get what you're saying.
So, one thing I heard, that for next month, show me a more gradual unification of the fixed charges. The difference between RS and TRS, and I'm sure that would then extend to TGSA and GSA 1.
I'm just trying to make that pill a little bit smaller, a little easier to swallow. And I understand that we're making it up on the volumetric side.
Right, it's like-
I get it.
Bottom line on the bills,
Right.
not gonna be different.
Yeah.
It's gonna be $1.27 different.
It's gonna be $1.27 different. Yeah.
But you're right, people will say, well, they've gone up $8 on the fixed charge. Yeah, but we went down $8
Well,
on the
and
kilowatt.
I'm not worried about what people say. I'm worried about what the actual impact is on people's, you know, on.
Well, there's no impact.
Well, we're not
Right,
changing, that's
on
not
the-
changing.
On the
though.
pocketbook. I mean,
That's the bottom line.
That's the bottom line.
But that's
Is it
not
about
actually
27?
changing, it's just a matter of whether they see it
Going
in
up
the
a
fixed charge.
$1.27.
Yeah.
Or that's what's so, whether they see it in the fixed charge or it's hidden in the volumetric.
Okay.
And it's the same money.
It's just rearranging the
It's
numbers.
kind of like it's not what you say, it's how you say it. I mean, but it's the same dollars in the end. That's, you know, kind of always made it feel a little,
And it also creeps us, I mean, every move that you make in this direction increases the amount of justice that people receive.
Yeah.
Because every time, when you have this volumetric component, there's winners and losers. If you're living in a house that uses a lot of energy, you're a loser because you're paying an extra fixed charge or an extra volumetric charge that the people that are using few kilowatt hours enjoy the benefit of.
but you can jump over to the RS rate if you're on the TRS rate.
Sure.
You
And the sad-
you can choose not
And
to
the
do that.
saddest thing about it is that the ones that can afford it the least are the ones that
Ones that
usually
are
use the
doing it.
most kilowatt hours.
That's exactly
And they're
right.
getting it stuck again.
That's exactly right.
The fallacy that developed in this whole conversation was low-income people use low amounts of kilowatt hours. dead wrong. Low-income people, as a rule, on average, use a lot more kilowatt hours.
No insulation.
And it's families though. That's
Well,
where you use all your power, washing clothes, this, that.
And it's families, but it's also, you know, lack of code enforcement and these houses that basically have nothing except a wall, no insulation, holes in ductworks and everything else.
So what I've asked you to look at is really not going, it's not going to have an impact because you're going to adjust both. What it's going to impact is that time frame to get it to where we want to be
And
fixed.
that is gonna, that will improve the acceptance of it, but it won't improve the math. I mean,
Yeah, the math
it's gonna be
stays-
$1.27.
Right,
I mean, no
The
more,
average house is gonna go up $1.27.
yeah.
It's just whether it comes from the fixed or,
Right.
Okay, I'll show you that. And of course, then that means too, we'll have to look at that situation with small commercial. The rest of them, the medium commercial, large commercials, it's all
It's all
variable
involved,
anyway.
yeah,
It should
right.
be a straightforward. The only big difference that would make is if you say we want to take the TVA deal. But for next month, this stuff that I owe you a report on, unless you all tell me more, that's what the difference will be between this and, between what you see in September and what you saw tonight.
Okay.
Except that you're gonna have to be, you've only looked at 2 tariffs tonight, there's 5 more to look at.
so what you've asked him to do was to look at the same increase the same increase on the TRS is what was gonna be on the RS to get it back to 7.
Something in line, yeah,
Four.
somewhere in that range, yeah, that $4 to $6 range, I'm just trying to.
So that you all may decide that, the fixed rate continues to track below the conventional rate, maybe until you get to 100%. They don't ever
Right.
become
Yeah.
union, they don't become.
It'll never
united.
be 100% of your cost, but what,
It'll be a year behind, but
yeah. What, any thought or any of maybe in doing the RS rate more than 441 to try to start pushing it closer to the,
you guys are in charge of the thought, man.
once again, remember, it doesn't change the bill, it just changes how we collect it.
Yeah.
But that would mean the volumetric rate would drop even lower.
Pick what you want to see, and we'll do the math. Now, you got some real kind of sticky wickets on the large commercial and medium commercial. They're still down at like 50%. And even below 50, and they need to come up. Of course, their collection mechanism is mainly demand charge. Like you remember when you ran your business. Now, they get 2 demand charges. One of them is the peak demand charge that everybody gets, but the second one is max demand, and that is where this comes from. And it's still so big that the volumetric component, you'll see it next month, is more than 50%. And doesn't fit really well with our architecture that we've chosen.
So have you run an analysis on those like you did the residential, if the large commercial customers had stayed with the non-volumetric rate, what that impact would be compared to the?
Oh, the old rates?
Uh-huh,
Well, we've done it for one customer who just asked,
okay.
and there was a pretty staggering difference.
Was there?
Yeah.
Okay.
A very big customer.
Well, so by no means am I recommending we make any decision on any of this tonight as far as this TVA, contract goes, but are they gonna start paying that 3.1% of me, or that credit?
September the 1st.
Okay, so we decide in September.
If you decide in September, they're gonna back up and give you the September.
So it's
1st.
retroactive to the first of the.
But after that, it's not retroactive anymore.
It's
After
October,
that, we
November.
meet at the end, the next meeting will be at the end of October. We wouldn't get it until November. We'd leave $100,000 on the table.
Okay.
Okay,
So let me ask you a question then. Ron and I were over here kind of whispering.
And I'm listening to you.
So let's say, so if we had that money each month, that wholesale credit they're talking about. So we're paying a pass-through rate anyway, so that money that we're getting back, where's that going?
On the rates that where it passes through, it goes straight to the
Directly to
customer.
the customers, except for
So
the
directly,
TRS.
that's what I want to know, directly to a customer.
Except for those on the TRS.
Except for the ones that
Except for the ones on the old non-variable.
You all will have to
variable
decide
restriction.
how we're gonna apply that to those customers. I mean, that's up to you. I mean, it can flow straight through to them as well, you know, because part of the calculus of that rate includes the wholesale cost. So it can flow through to them as well, but it's not as neat, because it's in there wrapped up. People wanted a simple rate, so you're wrapping up the wholesale cost, and guess at what their coincident peak demand is gonna be, and a guess at how many kilowatt hours they're gonna use, so.
I mean, I like that going back to the customer, but I just
Sure.
don't like a 20-year. That gone, there's just too much can.
Well, and I felt the same way until I really started thinking about, what are we gonna do in 5 years if, anyway? You know, what do we do in that 5th year if we decide, you know, what are our options? I mean, we can drop TVA,
Well, it's been, what, 15 years since we even found out what's available?
yeah. Well, no, that was, how long ago was that?
That was,
Well, it was close to
What,
15
15
years
years?
ago.
it was,
but-
one of my very first board meetings was when we voted to completely scrap the idea and come back, and that was about 12 years ago.
Well, somebody's gonna have to build a transmission. You know.
They've gotta build it,
Build it
or
out.
somebody's gotta
Hundreds
sell
hundreds
it.
of millions, apparently, is what they're saying down in Bowling Green. Somebody's gotta either build that, or we have to lease the lines from TVA. And they have us over a barrel there, what do you think's gonna happen there? They're gonna get us. So
Well,
I'm just trying to figure out how do you,
Glasgow, Paducah, and Princeton, and Bowling Green, that gave notice, and Warner Electric, that gave notice, paid the consultants, went through the whole process, learned how nearly impossible it is. Most of them don't know. We know, we've got experience. We're not conjecturing here about what might happen. We've done it. You know, we've gone shopping. And it's not just the transmission. I mean, that's a part of it, but how do you feel about, how's your crystal ball? TVA generates with hydropower. They have rights to rivers in the United States of America, which nobody else is gonna have. They have coal, they have natural gas, they have nuclear, they have oil backup. I mean, they've got a diverse portfolio. If some kind of regulation comes out that you can't burn natural gas anymore, TVA is not out of business. We go to somebody else that wants to sell us power from their natural gas plant, and you can't burn natural gas anymore, we're out of business.
Yeah,
We
I
got
understand
nothing.
that. I guess my thing is, like, even that 5%, that 5% in a 20-year time period, that just limits what the EPB can actually do, though.
Well, I mean, yeah, I guess that's one way to look at it, but you also need to look at the mirror image of it. If we learn that central station power can be relegated to the backwoods through that 2.5 megawatts that we can now do, then we'll be able to, if TVA doesn't want to move, we go to Congress, TVA's boss, and say, look, you just got to do something about this. We want to do 5 megawatts instead, or whatever the next thing is. I mean,
That 5% that we're discussing, that's 5% of your total kilowatt hour consumption?
well, they haven't stipulated that yet. One would think that it would be 5% of your maximum demand,
which is 50.
because you buy resources in demand ratings, not kilowatt hour ratings. So. But again, it just says we're going to negotiate something with you by 2024.
Well, I guess what I was trying to figure out, is there a way we could make that more valuable by some kind of storage and then shooting that into the grid at the right time? Can we leverage that 5% to make it by far and away the most valuable?
I think we know a lot more about that than
Well,
the
that's-
other 152, because we've got experience.
Well, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Shoot it back into the system at the time when we expect that peak demand to occur.
Yeah, and make it a lot more
Reduce that
valuable.
demand.
That's why I was asking, what, 5% of what?
But at the same time, there's something to be said for ensuring that our first responders and our healthcare system and all that have adequate, backup and, in the case we have
That's the microgrid concept.
The microgrid concept,
I'm in love with it. I've gotten to lay around a lot and think lately, and I've come up with all kinds of microgrid stuff that I want to start my team on.
Well, Ron, I hate to throw it on you, but I appreciate it if you can just kind of let us know what's going on with it.
It's kind of a big one. Study it pretty
We're
good.
gonna let you study that one for a little bit, and we'll have a lot more discussion about that.
Mr. Chairman, are you ready to go to the last agenda?
Moving on.
Okay, just got a few reports here. Do a little financial review. We'll talk about all this stuff real quickly. Let's just look at how we did in July as far as predicting the peak demand. We had a victory in July. We used 4 days and narrowly, very narrowly, picked the right day. So we will be able to bill our customers exactly what TVA bills us without a loss. Unfortunately, August is going to be a defeat. We used up all 4 of our days early last week and got a couple of more big peaks thrown on us. Probably going to lose $25,000 in August due to our agreement to limit our peak prediction days to 4 days. Unfortunately, Mother Nature has not agreed to do that. So the only way we can do it is to charge a little more to create a fund to pay for our losses, and we'll.
Where does that relieve the reserve now?
Yeah, I'll show you.
The rolling balance.
That's where that 5%
We
would help,
are
right,
at the end of July, 6 months in, we're $21,000 in the hole, which is a lot worse than we've done in the past, but
But we always said if you have 5 days and it's 95 each day, it's going to be, the peak will be the day you don't call the peak. Because they,
right, because people don't react that
we
way.
knew that.
Yeah.
We knew that going into it. And the better people get at reacting and, it's,
Yeah.
the more we're going to miss.
The mathematically pure thing was that what we first did, you pay for your contribution to the peak whenever it is.
Right.
But we decided to go with the 4 day.
Well, my concern with that was the ones that were least able to mitigate that were going to be the ones that ended up having the majority of that peak charge.
Let's see. Okay, let's talk about it real quick. We've got 2 bankruptcies going now, right now. On August the 1st, Glenview Healthcare filed bankruptcy. And the only reason I'm talking about it because it's fairly insignificant. But this is a good example of the kind of things that you board members are going to hear from time to time, where Joe Sterling Glasgow personality is putting in a business and we ask them for a big deposit. And they come to you because that damn Billy Ray is trying to, and Lord knows I would never not pay my bill. Well, here's an example of that. Glenview Healthcare has been one of the finest customers for decades, never had any issue with them paying, and we only had $3,400 worth of security against them. But even the finest, most upstanding people sometimes wind up in trouble financially, and this is one of them. I have no idea what the reason was. All I know is on the day they filed bankruptcy, they owed us $8,800. We got $3,400 worth of security. Our exposure is $5,400. And we're an unsecured creditor for that, so I'm betting we'll lose that, and that'll show up on your write-off list. And then we're going to try in post-bankruptcy to establish a $9,000 deposit to cover the exposure that we have. But the only reason this is worth talking about is that in your tenure on the board, there's going to be some situation where somebody comes to you and says, I hope you'll help me, because those guys don't realize how upstanding I am, and I shouldn't have to pay a deposit. Okay, well, here's what happens. And you can predict it as much as I know where the sun's gonna come up in the morning. So that's where we are on that one. Then we've got this windstream thing, which is about to swell up. So the only new thing here is that we got a call from a firm that's considering buying Windstream's assets. And the strange thing about that call was they just wanted to know if it's okay for them to just take over Windstream stuff and be on our poles, you know, on 4,000 poles. And so I had to send the guy an email, explain to him that, you know, it's a lot more complicated than that. To be allowed on the city's right of way, in my opinion, and I also copied that email to the city attorney, to Danny Basil and to Ron, I have to have a franchise to use the city's right of way. South Central has to have a franchise. And what's a franchise for? Well, a franchise is kind of like a lease agreement. And if you'll notice, pick a street. When you leave here tonight, drive up South Green Street to the square, and you'll see at least 7, 8 poles where there's 2 poles sitting right next to each other. Why is that like that? And why is one of them smack in the middle of the sidewalk? Well, I'll tell you why. Because Windstream doesn't have a franchise. Somehow they got grandfathered in or whatever. So when we set a new pole because somebody hit one or the old one was rotten or whatever, and we try to move it over out of the sidewalk, they don't feel motivated to do that. The city has just redone the intersection there at Bunch Avenue, and it looks great except for one problem. There's a pole smack in the middle of the brand new sidewalk, and it's a Windstream pole, and they got cables on it, and instead of them transferring to our new pole, they just don't do it. So when the city has a franchise, they got the right to say, hey, under the terms of our franchise, if you don't move that thing, I'm gonna charge you $100,000, whatever you get in the franchise. So I tried to get the message out to everybody that you want to buy Windstream's assets, you need to be a better citizen than Windstream has been. Now, whether the city does anything with that, I don't know, but we're early in the conversation. Maybe it's possible that after he got my response, they said, you know, sounds like they're going to be a pain to deal with. Maybe we'll just move on.
Of course, they're buying assets. They're not obligated to, under the terms of any, you know, previous commitments or
I don't know.
or contracts.
That's part of the email was send me a written copy of what do you want and what have you got? What kind of a sales agreement do you have?
But that also means that they're not bound by this. They're going to have to get a franchise to operate.
I hope they do.
Because they're buying assets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's all I've got for you tonight.
So I have another question. So like on businesses, industry, how is their deposit determined?
Well, to the best of our ability, we look at the history of that site, if it's already had somebody there, and try to come up with a 2-month deposit, because that's what our exposure is. By the time they get one bill, they've used up the next month before that one's due, so you pretty much always got 60 days worth of exposure.
Right.
So you try to make it 2 times what the anticipated bill is. Now, if it's a new deal, a new business, and we don't have any experience with it, we have to sometimes use kind of the scientific wild guess. And we're usually not far off on that. And when we're off, we're usually on the too liberal side. Look what we just,
Yeah.
we thought $3,000 was plenty for that nursing home.
When you have that business expanded quite a bit, I think, a few years ago, then do you adjust it?
Well, if they're expanding, what we should do is go ask them for more security. What they do is go crazy that you don't want any business to expand here, we just get mistreated. Well, I mean, it's either they feel that way, because who's going to pay that $5,000? All the other customers.
Right.
It becomes part of our fixed costs.
Yeah, that's where I'm going with this, because every time we're losing money, and I hate it that happened to them. You know, I hate
I hope
that.
they come out of it, it's a great place.
Exactly. But at the same time, we are a nonprofit organization.
Right. It's
So
not
we
the
can't
EPB.
afford, because then it's Mary Jo and Sally Sue who are the ones that's gonna be making it up.
Yeah, your
You know,
duty is to
and
protect
that's-
our customers'
Yes,
interests.
and
It's not the
so we
EPB's
gotta come
money.
up with some way.
How did our fixed costs go up $1.27? The last year, we probably had more write-offs.
Exactly, exactly.
And that goes right straight to the
Exactly.
fixed cost.
So, you know, I don't know what the answer to that is, but we're gonna have to visit, especially, because I know that's, in the last couple of months, we've talked about multiple businesses
Sure.
who have left us with big bills.
It's our job, unless you all dictate to me otherwise, to collect adequate security, just like a bank does,
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that if you don't pay, we've got something to fall back on.
And I do have one other question. That, I was reading through the financial metrics earlier, and you have operations through that June 30th year in unaudited numbers, but
Yeah.
it looked like there's a substantial increase in the net income number for the year. Is that attributable to that, what we were trying to adjust for that retirement in the previous year? Was that
Well,
where some of that comes from?
some of it is that the adjustment we did last year was really aggressive, and the one that Melanie did this year, because they haven't told us yet, is probably
Not
liberal.
Not too aggressive
So
enough.
that deal, wait until the audit's done.
Yeah.
Before,
Well-
before you celebrate
Right.
that. But, I mean, obviously though, as we move toward collecting fixed costs with fixed charges, it stabilizes our bottom line.
Right.
So part of it is that a mild year would cripple us.
Right.
Or an unusually hot or cold year makes us make more money than we should have.
Anybody else have anything else? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second.
Motion made, seconded. All in favor of adjourning, signify by saying aye.
Ah.
Opposed, like sign. We are adjourned.